Alrighty, hi, my name is Steph LaRoche. I'm in the POLS 2500 course, which is International Relations with Dr. Hearsey. This is actually the second time I have recorded this. The first one uploaded and it did not have any audio with it. It was just muted the entire time, so that is why my first link, I took it down because it was just an error, so I am going to be reading Benjamin Ervin's, I'm sorry if I mispronounce that. I'm going to be reading your paper, which is Gender in Minnesota, Feminist IR reading of the film Fargo. I thought the paper had a good premise. It definitely has some good aspects to it. I did have a little trouble with the formatting of it. And I did just take some notes, so I had a framework of what I was going to talk about. So my first thing was on the top of page 2, I actually have your paper pulled up on the computer screen that's holding my phone up. There was, I'm going to look at just like the mechanics too. I very much look at that kind of stuff because I like to proofread for people like mechanics and content wise, so I'll get a little bit of both. So on the top of page 2 it says the driver looks across the bar to two men sitting in a booth. I think you might have meant to put sitting. It was just a little typo if that's how it was. And then one of the characters that Peter Stormare plays, I haven't seen Fargo in a long time, so I don't remember the character names. I remember the actors, but I don't remember the character names. So Grimsrud, his first name throughout the paper is misspelled. The first time it's mentioned, it's Gaear, and then other times it's, I think it's Gatear or AR, I'm not sure. So I would just maybe take a look at that because it's misspelled a couple times. And then one thing that you might want to consider is possibly using their last names instead of their first names. Unless you have a married couple, then you could probably, or siblings or anything like that, you could refer to them by their first names. But I would possibly use their last names instead, just because it's a little confusing. And that's usually how like you would reference any authors. I did find one issue with your paper was that the first 5 pages feel more like a sort of screenplay rather than a synopsis, because only a portion, about I think 20% or less of our paper is supposed to be like plot synopsis. And I feel like the first 5 pages was a very like almost informal play-by-play kind of setup. Like the bottom of page 2 is the screen fades to black. I would maybe take that out because I feel like it's just unnecessary. It doesn't have any merit for the paper. And maybe just explain the premise of the movie like you were writing a you were writing it for, say, trying to think of the word, I lost my train of thought. Like you were writing one paragraph that described the plot synopsis. So, like, as you read in my paper, like, I spent probably a good 2 paragraphs explaining the plot of each movie, because I did Alien and Aliens. So I would possibly do that. And then one thing, another thing was, you didn't mention feminism until page 5, and then you didn't mention feminism as an international relations theory until about page 8. So I would maybe explain, because part of the 20% that Dr. Hearsey broke up the paper into was 20% of it is talking about the theory, 20% is talking about its myth function, 20% the film, and I can't remember exactly what the other ones were, but I'm not positive about this. I'm pretty sure he wanted us to reference Weber, or however you pronounce her last name, the textbook that we use, Cynthia Weber, however you say it. I did mention her in mine, but I don't believe that I cited the textbook, which I'm not sure if you picked up on. If you did, good, because I need to fix that. But one thing I did notice about when you talk about feminism is focus less on it as a social aspect, and focus more on how it relates, how it puts women in power, so to speak, and less using the word woman and women and using more of the word feminism, because we're not talking about just women in here, we're talking about gender, we're talking about feminism as a whole, which yes, it does pertain to women, but I think it's supposed to be more the idea of feminism, not the specific individual woman involved. And then I don't remember what page this was on. Oh, actually, at first I'm gonna talk about this. So, I understand it's a rough draft, but at the top of page 3, where you put enter analysis of constructivism / masculine theory in brackets, I'm not sure why it was in there. Maybe it was, I don't know if it was like you're using it your own like framework when you were typing it out and you might have just forgot to take it out. But I wouldn't focus too much on other aspects, other theories of IR. I would personally try to stick with feminism because there's not a whole lot of talk about it in your paper. It's the majority of your paper. I'm sorry if I come across as harsh, by the way. I'm not trying to be. This is just what I felt the paper was like, and it's nothing personal, obviously. I just felt that the majority of your paper was spent discussing the film, like that, what I mentioned, like the screenplay. And then the Las Vegas, Bangkok analogy, it was kind of just briefly mentioned and then you moved on to the next thing. I would either remove it. I don't know if you were talking about like prostitutes with it. I'm not sure like what you were trying to go for that. I'm assuming it has to do something with prostitutes. And on page 6, when you're talking about, let me pull it up right here. I have the notes, but it's easier to like look at it and see it. On page 6, where you talk about Jean, though Jean is married, she's expected to fill a certain requirement. Jean doesn't sell herself, but is married into the role of being a wife. I would possibly add in there that she did sell herself. She sold her freedom, her independency, and she sold her, and some people would say her soul into marriage, to be a wife and to be a caregiver. So you could possibly mention that too. Let's see. And when it comes down to when you start discussing feminism with, in the movie, like with Marge and, Marge, sorry, and the other characters, I would focus less on quite literally what they're doing. Like Marge does this, and she is a woman in power and she does this because she's a woman in power. I would focus more on like the deeper meaning, the critical like understanding, kind of just think critically so that like you can see better like how it's like that. I need to move along. I have a couple note cards and I'm only on the first one. And then with article titles, movie titles, please make sure you use proper punctuation. That is, I took film 2010 and I forgot to do that for my one of my final papers, and I got tagged on that. I'm not sure how Dr. Hearsey is on that, but I would definitely go through and make sure you italicize film titles, article titles. that's what I did. I italicized them. I'm not sure if that's the proper way to do it, but that's what I would do. And then there's a part when you're talking about prostitutes, you can type into the search on Microsoft Word. Sorry, we have these robins that fly into our windows, and it's sitting outside my window right now. But when you're talking about prostitutes, I can't remember where it was. It might have been on page 5, it might have been. You say Protestantism, and I don't know if you meant to type prostitute, or if you were trying to use Protestantism, it just didn't kind of fit in there. I didn't understand the context of it, so I would take a look at that. At the top of page 3, under where you have the enter constructivism thing in brackets, that is a run-on sentence. I would split that up. And then talking about like feminism is more of a social movement and a social aspect rather than IR, a theory of IR. I noticed in my paper that I kind of did that as well, but in here I feel like you only mentioned it as an IR theory once or twice. And then on page 8 you say only you men. The wording there was just a little weird. And then explain more about the genderless brain. I didn't really understand what you were saying there. And my hair is a mess. I just got out of the shower. I apologize. I would explain that. It just feels like it was kind of thrown in there with no context or any relation. And then, it's not good to have 2-sentence paragraphs. However, it's worse to have large paragraphs that take up a whole page that talk about different things and there's no breakup in there. So it's not good to have little tiny snippets as paragraphs, but I would definitely change that. You want to separate it so it's like the start of a new idea and it helps the paper flow better and it makes it gives the paper some more substance, I guess you could say. It makes it seem like it's longer than it really is because it's like, oh, here's another idea, here's another idea, here's another idea, rather than just one run-on sentence. And then when you talk about, I can't remember, I should have put page numbers on here, it's my own fault that I didn't do that, but when you talk about women are incapable of such an act, I understood that it was coming from the article that psychologist or whoever it was the one saying that, but the way that it's phrased makes it sound like this is what this psychologist thinks, that women aren't capable of higher thinking, and then the next sentence is women are incapable of such an act. I know it's not your opinion, but it's phrased like it is, so maybe change that around so it looks like it's this, the article that you're referencing that you got that from. And then when it gets into talking about Marge, there was more of that screenplay, like play-by-play, like plot synopsis. I'm just gonna be honest, we don't need all of that in there. It's kind of unnecessary, and it's just a lot of unnecessary information that could be used to talk about more feminism, more international relations. And then when you talk about women and liberalism, I really didn't understand what you were going for there. Were you talking about it as like international theory liberalism, neoliberalism? Was it as civil rights, human rights, a liberal in a big government? I'm not really sure. Like, I wouldn't touch upon that or even mention it unless you have the time and space to explain it. Don't use like a broad brush to paint over that women are mostly liberals. I mean, I'm not trying to go a little off topic here, but I may be a woman, I may be I may swing more toward feminism, but that doesn't mean, just because I'm a feminist doesn't mean I'm a liberal. I'm actually registered as a Republican. I'm a moderate conservative, and you kind of just painted over that women in feminism are liberal. So I would just honestly just cross that out. I would just take it out of there. So yeah, try not to tie all women to being liberals. And then, oh geez, I'm on the 15-minute mark. So, I think this is more toward the end. Inclusive politics in IR theory that before is not seen. I would change that around. As like the wording of it was just kind of odd. It was maybe change it to quote, idea that feminism is a true theory of IR which is just as credible as the others. Excuse me, I'm sorry. So I would just use that because feminism in IR to me is trying to show that it is just as important as the other aspects of IR that we've discussed. It's just as important as environmentalism, liberalism, realism, anarchism that we're going to discuss. Your conclusion was a little lackluster. I wanted to read more, but I flipped the page and it was the works cited. And like I said, I understand this is a rough draft, so I would definitely work on that, like make your conclusion more, for lack of a better term, conclusive. Because I was reading it and I was like, oh, okay, you're mentioning this topic, and then I just wanted to read more, something that really just like cut it off right there. There wasn't a cliffhanger, it just stopped it right there, and it wasn't there. And then one little thing, like I said, I nitpick things. One other thing is that when you use plural nouns, they don't have an apostrophe S on the end of them. The apostrophe shows possession. Like if you say, I can't remember, like the second word of the essay is Fargo opens with a title card. You wouldn't use an apostrophe there because you would just use an S. There's no possession there. So please, I would definitely go through and look at that. And then, like I said, italicize and put dates with Fargo. So like you saw, I put Alien 1979. It was italicized. Then you do Aliens 1986. Put in parentheses the year that it came out, because there can be multiple versions of a film. For example, like The Evil Dead. There's two of them. There's one from the 80s, and then there's the one that came out in, I believe, 2013. And if you don't put a date in there, that kind of leaves a question of, well, which one are you talking about? And especially with Fargo, too, since it's a show on FX now, and it's the same title, it's Fargo. I understand we're talking about the film here, but if somebody wasn't to read the title, they could possibly think it's about the TV show as well. So please clarify that in there. And then my last thing was, I felt that there wasn't a lot of talk of feminism in here, and that your title was Feminist IR Reading of the film Fargo. Oh, and just capitalize reading in the title. Sorry. I feel like you tried bringing in liberalism and then that one part with the masculine theory, constructivism. I feel like you should just leave those out, honestly, because you are focusing on feminism. You're not incorporating other topics in there. And then I personally thought you need more substance than Marge defying gender roles and Jean and the prostitutes filling gender roles. Because feminism in this sense is about putting women in roles of leadership and power and seeing how gender affects how states deal with each other. That's my personal, that's my personal definition of feminism and IR. And I feel like your paper just doesn't focus on that at all. It focuses on an analysis of Fargo and like a literal play-by-play. So I need to stop because I'm hitting 20 minutes. So I will post this. Like I said, it wasn't, it was a good paper. You had some notable points. I just feel like you really need to sit down and rework this, because I found a lot of inconsistencies and kind of just areas where you would mention something and then move on. So I feel like you really need to sit down and just work on this. So I'll get this, to finish this up, I will get this video posted. Hopefully it doesn't take too long. And I will be looking for your video as well. And then I'll post my comment video. So thank you. And like I said, this was nothing personal. I'm a very nitpicky person. Because I think, because I'm going to be a teacher, I'm very nitpicky about things. So have a good day, and I can't wait to hear your response about my video.